take any more of his time, so please welcome Chad.
Thank you, Kelly. Really appreciate that and really appreciate you being here tonight. I know that's been said already, but there's a lot of places you could have been, including in your nice warm home with this blustery, crazy wind and rain outside. And so what you're going to get tonight is a condensed version of my 3.5-hour workshop. So we're going to try to fit it, and we're going to fit it into less than 2 hours here tonight. We'll have a couple of breaks in between those sessions, but this first session that I've entitled is all about how to be a better digital parent. And it really comes down to more so less technology and more about our parenting. And I think you understand that. But as parents, I think we all need to be reminded of that. I have a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old, all boys. And I am absolutely about to be right in the middle of that right now. And so for those of you who have children, obviously, for those of you who will have children, it is going to be an incredibly wonderful thing, but at the same time, we have to realize as parents that we are our children's protectors first. We are their protectors. God has charged us with their protection. He has picked us, and you think about this. I've read a book one time that said this. He has chosen us specifically to parent those specific children. We don't think about that very often, but you know your child more and better than anybody else does. And so this is what we're going to talk about tonight. I do want to give you a little bit of information. My website, digitalparentingworkshop.com, is a place that you can go. You can find lots of different resources there on that resources page. And you will find all of the slides that I'm using tonight, including all of the ones that will be used in other sessions there as well. Download those, redistribute those. None of this stuff is copyrighted. I've been working on writing a book about this for what seems like 5 years. And every time I get it written, something changes or I have different ideas, and I just haven't gotten that done yet. But I also have a YouTube channel. I don't post there a whole lot because, you know, life and gets in the way. But I will be posting this very video on the channel. And so we'll make sure that that's on there, and I will give that link to Kelly as well. So if you've got any questions or if you want to get in touch with me there on that website, feel free to do that as well. Have you ever seen Vegas Vacation? Remember that movie? That's a silly, stupid movie, right? There's a spot where Chevy Chase's character is walking through the Hoover Dam, and they're walking under it, and there's this wall that is sweating, right? You've seen this. And he thinks, oh no, it's leaking because it's his character and he's not very, bright or whatever. And he goes and chews some gum and puts it on the spot, and it plugs the hole, and he goes, oh, wow, I did something amazing. And then 2 more little spouts pop out. And then he gets more gum, and he's chewing more gum, and he's putting all the things. And as soon as he plugs one hole, 2 more pop out. 2 more pop out. And eventually the whole wall has all these leaks, and he just kind of does this and looks around and walks away, right? That's kind of how it feels when you're a parent sometimes, isn't it? You get one problem solved. Boom. That hole is plugged. Oh, now we have 2 more problems, 3 more problems, 5 more problems that we've got to deal with. And I understand that. Now, having been a parent now for over a decade, I'm starting to finally understand that. But the point of that is that parenting can feel like that sometimes. And we just have to keep going. We have to keep plugging those holes. We have to keep figuring out what we can do to bring our kids closer to a relationship with God and His Son, but also make sure that they are raised in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I said it before, this is a parenting issue more so than it is a technology issue. We tend to want to look at these screens and blame them for what it's doing to our kids, what kind of influence it has on our kids. And we would be partially correct. We can talk about that. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. We can be partially correct that we can blame the technology. Some of this technology is designed specifically to be addictive, okay? And we know that. But what I will say is that there is never a substitute for your good godly parenting. It's very, very important that we understand that. So this is a parenting issue much more than it is a technology issue. And the question I've asked since the beginning, I was telling, I believe, John, this is my 88th time doing this workshop in some form or fashion, okay, over the last 10 years or so. And I've been very blessed to be able to do that in a bunch of different places. But the question I've always asked, the one thing that has not changed, I've asked this question: do you know what your children are doing? Do you know what accounts they have? Do you know what websites they frequent, what YouTube videos they're watching? Do you understand what they're doing on Snapchat? I don't understand Snapchat. I'm glad that my kids don't have it yet or not old enough to have it yet, right? But do you understand, or do you know who they're talking to on Snapchat? Do you know what they're doing? And if you can't answer 100% affirmative on that, if your kid is under about 18, 17 years old, then you need to make sure, you need to reevaluate, and you need to make sure that you're doing that. It is not an invasion of privacy to be protecting your kids on these devices. Believe it or not, I get that question sometimes. Well, what about my child's privacy? And I just want to be like, how old is your child? And they're like 13. And I'm like, ooh, well, they should get privacy in the shower. Yeah. That's about it. You know, that's about in the bathroom, and that's about it. Otherwise, they don't rate any privacy. You need to be making sure that they are safe and secure in what they're doing, okay? And this is a constant struggle. It is a constant full-time job. My boys have their own devices. They have iPads. They have a certain amount of time they can be on them per day, and it's still exhausting. Them coming to me and going, I want to download this app. I go, oh, because there's like 18 steps that I got to go through now okay, I got to authorize it here, and I got to put in this password, and I got to do this dance, and then I got to do, and it's amazing the stuff. But guess what? That hassle is keeping them safe. The 18 PIN codes that you got to put in to watch a Netflix movie after your kids go to bed, that's protecting your kids. Because kids are not, I wouldn't say that any of our kids are inherently bad. I would say they're just naive. They don't understand, and they don't see that danger. They don't see the reason why can't I watch this? Well, because it has ideas you're forming your identity right now. And we don't want you to form an identity to think that these things are okay. All right? So anyway, getting into the bigger picture and talking about that. If you've got a Bible app or anything like that, or if you want to follow along with me, Psalm 127:1. This is another scripture I've kind of used since the beginning of the workshop. Psalm 127:1 simply says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And I think that's very interesting, because when we say if the Lord doesn't have a part in building the entire home, every brick, every facet, every single part. When I started this 10 years ago, it was a struggle to just get parents to pay attention to these kinds of things. And what I have seen since then is a generation or two that's coming out. This is about the third generation that's kind of starting, with people having kids in their late 20s and early 30s. This is the third generation of parents that I've seen that they actually know what they're doing. The ones that are struggling are the ones that are my age, the ones that are 42, 45, who grew up in a time without this technology, but it came about when we were in, high school, college, maybe even sooner than that. And so we struggle with it because we go, yeah, I know and I understand not to give my address and social security number and password out anywhere like that, right? I know not to click on this link. I know not to do that, but our children, they don't necessarily understand that. Our children aren't nefarious, I don't think. They're naive. So we need to be there to teach them. I think that when we think about every part, that scripture says that every part of the home must be focused on it. And when we think about digital parenting, I think we need to think about it as an integral part of what we're doing as a parent. It is one of those things that you have to factor in. You must today factor in technology when you are parenting your children. And I think we realize that, but it took us a generation or two, the last 10, 15 years to realize that. Speaking of realizations, there's a couple of things that I think that we can talk about, and we're going to talk about some of these things, and I'm going to have a couple in our next session. We're going to have a break here in just a little bit, but I'm going to have some discussion, open-ended questions for you that I'd love to discuss with you. This is a perfect size group for that. But the first thing I think we need to realize is that technology moves really fast. I think we know that. So do your kids. Your kids can do amazing, wonderful things with this technology. I have a 12-year-old who is on the autism spectrum. His iPad is his creativity tool. He films videos, he'll make animations, he'll find all sorts of stuff how to do on an iPad that me, even being a nerd, I don't understand how he does it sometimes. Because I'll be like kind of sidling up to him going, show me how you did that. Show me how you did that. And it's really, really neat to see the creativity that these kids have. Albert Mohler said this, it's a really good quote. The digital age, he said this back in 2014, digital age is upon us. In a span of less than 3 decades, we have redefined the way that humans communicate, entertain, inform, research, create, and that last one, very important, connect. And what we know now is only a hint of what is to come. Apple just announced that weird headset that they're going to put out. They're going to actually have it out at the 1st of February. What does technology look like in 5 or 10 years? Is everybody wearing those headsets and getting work done on those headsets and entertaining themselves in headsets and having their own sphere and thing? What about our children? And what are they seeing through those headsets that we can't necessarily see? So again, it's these questions that we must ask about technology and what the boundaries of that technology will be inside of our homes, okay? Yeah, you laugh, but this is about, let me just do a little informal survey here. How many of you fall in the age range 35 to 45? How many of us? Okay, so a good chunk, 35 and below, okay? And 45 and above, okay? So the 35 and above crowd understands everything about this. Our younger people in here go, and it's like we're talking about 5 to 10 years of separation. They don't know what these things are. I told a story not too long ago about trying to find a payphone to a group of kids who were 15, 16, 17 years old, and they were just like looking at me like I had painted my face red. And they're like, yeah, like a pay-as-you-go phone that you get at Walmart, like like a track phone. I'm like, no, not a track phone. Like a pay phone, you put a quarter in, and they just did not understand the concept because it's something that is, it feels like such a bygone era. We don't understand, or they don't understand rather. Remember when the internet was a place? Remember when it wasn't in your pocket? You had to go to a place like a library and get on it and check your email. You weren't watching videos. There was no Netflix. You were lucky to be able to pull up an email with a picture in it, right? And have it load over your 56K modem, right? I remember Yellow Pages. Yellow Pages are such a thing of the past. But we use those things to hold down our refrigerator in a storm or something. I don't know. It was just these immense things. Huntsville, Alabama had these huge Yellow Pages, and I would flip through there and look for these things back in the 90s. Makes us seem so old. But you think about the separation there. We're talking about between 95 and 2005, the amount of change that happened. The iPhone is only 17 years old. That sounds like a big number, but it hasn't been out that long. And it's not even been 2 decades yet. And so again, just look at how things have changed just in the last 25 years. Our kids are constantly connected. Our kids, this generation of kids, the kids that are growing up, if you have a 16, 17, 18-year-old or below right now, they will never know the world, or they have never known the world without YouTube or Netflix. They have never known the world without Facebook. Social media was not a new phrase to them 15, 20 years ago. They have grown up with it. So how are we going to protect? How are we going to minister to these children? That's the question. When we think about it, the distraction has been around for a very long time. This is a photo from a train in 1928. I had several old people. I went to a seniors breakfast this morning where the average age was about 75. And they're always talking about, well, that's all the kids ever do. They're always distracted. It's not new. It's not new. Now, the convenience, when you think about these devices, the convenience is new. The technology is new. The access, that's a key word too. The access is new. Because I can punch up anything I want on this device that has a 5G connection and pull it down in a matter of seconds. They never had that kind of technology. And so again, we have to think about what our kids are going to be growing up with and how to protect them. I love this photo. The average age here, I believe, was about 77 or so. And they did not know. This is two elders, one of our seniors minister and their wives, and I just happened to do that. And I show this picture to kids and say, you are not the only ones that are essentially addicted to these devices. And I think we as parents have seen those videos before that we will be at the playground and we're just doing this and we get so preoccupied with it. I was talking with somebody before here and they said, these devices have allowed us to be accessible 24 hours a day and we've just let it happen. So how do we create, again, those boundaries with this thing? Every generation has had to figure it out. And the generation I'm seeing now, they're starting to figure out. Number 2, this one's tough to hear. I didn't promise you that this was going to be easy to hear tonight. But we can never use the excuse that we didn't know. When I did my taxes for the first time as an actual adult being out of college, my tax guy that was doing my taxes, he says, okay, so it was like January, February or something. I thought, I'm going to get ahead. I'm going to do my taxes, get my return, right? He's like, yeah, you owe $4,000. And I said, excuse me? Now, granted, $4,000 might as well, when you've only been married for 8 months, might as well be $4 million, right? It was just completely crazy to think that I owed that much money. My excuse was I just didn't know. When I called the IRS, I tried to tell them, well, I just didn't know. What do you think they said to me? Right? They said, we'll be happy to set up a payment plan for you, Mr. Lamon. Just sign here. And that was it. The information was out there. The classes that I was supposed to have not slept through at Freed-Hardeman happened, right? We have to think about this in the same way as we think about our digital parenting. The information that we're seeking, the help that we're seeking, maybe the inspiration or the guidance is out there. We've just got to find it. We've got to find the proper ways to secure these devices. We've got to think about, well, what's the dangers of this app before I let my 15-year-old download it? Or what can this app potentially do before I let my 14-year-old talk to whoever they want to on this app? We need to be the ones doing that homework and educating ourselves. We do it with everything else in our lives. We make plans for everything else in our lives, right? You did not just buy a house like you go to McDonald's, right? You didn't just do that. You made plans for that. You are saving for your retirement and for your kids' college intentionally, on purpose. And we have to make saving for retirement and college and all those different things as intentional as we do digital parenting. So again, that's kind of my push to inspire. A couple of verses and I always like to figure out what the Bible says, in a couple different ways whenever I can. There's a couple of interesting verses. Psalm 18, verse 6, actually Matthew 18, verse 6. Jesus is talking to a group of people and he tells them this. He says, he's talking about, and he calls a child to him and he says, but whoever causes these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. If you think about other things that Jesus said about the influence that we have on children and their minds and their bodies, if we think about that, Jesus was incredibly serious. And this is some very serious language from here. It'd be better for you to tie a concrete block around your neck and be thrown into the Cumberland River, right, than it would be to lead one child astray. That's essentially what he's saying. So he was serious about it. Now, us as parents, we have to think about that in a different perspective too. We wouldn't ever wish to lead any of our children astray, would we? Proverbs 29:15, you probably got this quoted by your grandparents to you, by your parents many, many times, right? The rod and reproof give wisdom, right? But listen to the second part of that verse. But a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. I think those verses are very, very telling. And I think that when we think about our digital parenting, it goes right along with, adjacent to, what we're actually trying to teach our kids in worship, in spirit, and in truth, and all the different things. Why do we bring them to church on Sundays but allow them to see things on their screens that we would never approve of? So again, we need to be more watchful and more vigilant. All right, here's the not fun part. Here's some statistics for you. 1.9 billion sites on the internet. This was a few years old now, but late 2022, there's 1.9 billion sites on the internet. About 68 million of those are dedicated to nudity or pornography. Now, if you're a mathematician, you do the math there real quick. That rounds out to about 0.05%. You may have heard somewhere in a couple of different places that half the internet is pornography. And again, we can pick on pornography because it's the thing that we think about the most. There's a lot of other issues that our kids are having to deal with. But if we think about this is a problem that the church, that we as the church, that people, we as Christians are just not talking about. 68 million, 0.05%. Not a big deal, right? Odds are in our favor. This is the number that is not in our favor. 1 in 5. 20%. It's edging up towards 1 in 4. It's edging up towards 25% now. 1 in 5 searches made on a mobile device, an iPhone, an iPad, an Android phone, are for pornography. 1 in 5, almost 1 in 4. Do you find that hard to believe? Is that, and you say no, because it's almost like nothing is shocking anymore, right? And again, I don't tell you these statistics to shock you. I tell them because this is the world that we're living in. A couple of quotes here. Very smart people. Adolescents who view pornography feel shame, diminished self-confidence, and sexual uncertainty. You think about your little boy, your little girl. You think about your teenage boy, teenage girl. Do you need them being any more sexually uncertain and questioning of that than they already are? My 9-year-old in the car going to get shots, going to get allergy shots. We do allergy shots. And he asked about that because he saw on the TV screen while we were waiting in allergy shots, he saw one of those home makeover shows where 2 men that were married were buying a house together. He asked about that. How open are we to discussing those things with our kids? And most importantly, are we listening to our kids when they're talking? Because we have a tendency to kind of, it's not important right now. We need to do this. We need to be listening as well. Significant relationship exists between social media use at too early of an age and feelings of loneliness, including major depression, clinical level depression in adolescents, 13 to 18 years old. A kid who has too much influence or too much activity on social media at too early of an age, this is the studies that are coming out now about this. I've got a couple of things here, but one of the worst ideas that we can have, the worst idea probably known to humanity is giving your middle schooler access to social media. If you have let them, even on safe Facebook, right? If you've let them be on Twitter or X or whatever it's called this week, if you've let them be on Threads or Instagram, or if you've let them do that, if they're 6th, 7th, 8th grade, all I got to say is that is writing a recipe for disaster. You need to reevaluate that if you have done that. Now, at the same time, there has to be a balance there, right? Because when your kids go off to college, whether they go here, right here to MTSU, or they go off to Tennessee and Knoxville, or they go somewhere else, right, across the country, you're going to have to prepare them for that. And so there's a very precious sliver of time there between about 8th grade and 12th grade where they need to be prepared. And this is one of the number one questions, other than when is it okay to get my child a phone? The second most question I get is what is a plan? How do I figure out when to do what with my child? And I'm going to talk about that here at the end of this session, because you and your spouse need to make a plan. Just talked about it. We make plans for everything else in life. We need to make a digital parenting plan. In fact, if you go to digitalparentingworkshop.com and go to the resources page, there is literally something called the DPP. It's the Digital Parenting Plan, and it just gives you a worksheet to just kind of brainstorm ideas. Hey, when are we going to let him have a phone? When are we going to let her have social media? What websites are we going to let her visit? What things are we going to let her access? All these different questions that you just need to be thinking about, and you can make your own plan. So hope that's helpful for you. But man, that wind is something. Did it knock down the chair? I was waiting on that. This one is funny. Funny. This one is interesting. Parents are the weak link in the chain when it comes to protecting their children. We are at ground zero. If you take a chain, tie it around a bush, and you're trying to pull that thing out of the ground, right? If that chain has a weak link, if it has a weld that's not quite done, if it's breaking in a certain point, it's going to just snap right there, right? And sometimes we're that weak link. We need to make sure that at least we cover that basis, that we are never the weak link. Let's keep on going, talk about some stuff. Does that surprise you? It's true. Sadly, no. It's trending down more towards 7 years old. I know that my 12-year-old has already seen it on accident. And it was at school, actually. He goes to a public school. And so it's amazing to think about this and an 8-year-old seeing those types of things. Okay? And again, nudity, pornography is just one of the issues that we're dealing with. And that's one of the things that I chose to kind of pick on here. But when we think about this, 94% of children ages 8 to 18 have seen nudity on their screens, most while doing homework. Now, why would I say that? When do you want your kids to get their homework done? Hopefully, maybe in the afternoon, first thing before you go. You don't want them doing homework. They don't want to be doing homework at 9 p.m. at night, right? So you want them to kind of get it done right as they get home. But guess what? You might still be at work, and increasingly, kids are required to go online and do research and do different things. And guess what? Kids are going to be kids. Sometimes we forget that, don't we? That kids are naturally curious, they're naturally naive, and they're going to search out things that they shouldn't. And so we need to, again, be aware of that. The two, can anybody tell me, the two riskiest times are between 3 and 5 p.m. For a child to access something that they shouldn't. Can anybody tell me the other time of the day, you think? Just spit something out to me. What do you think? You're like, well, I'm home the rest of the time. When else is it happening? 1 and 2 a.m., believe it or not. You know why? Because we're letting them take devices to their rooms. They wake up. Maybe they went to sleep. Maybe they haven't went to sleep yet. They'll wake up. They'll watch a YouTube video. They'll start communicating with their friends. I have had so many, probably half a dozen at this point, mothers and fathers come to me and say that they were presented something in the middle of the night by a neighbor or a friend or somebody that was sending inappropriate photos to one another, that was sending inappropriate websites, inappropriate links, all sorts of different stuff. And it was because they simply did not take that device up at bedtime. Very important. When you joke around, I'll say something about this at the end of this session, but when I say that to kids, they're just like, oh, right? How dare you? How dare you take my device? And then I joke around about, they say, I need an alarm clock. It's like, well, they have alarm clocks for $9.88 at Walmart. And you can wake up to the basketball buzzer like I did. Well, I listen to music to go to sleep. And it's like, hey, there's something called radio and a compact disc. Remember those? And it's just a foreign concept to them, but there are solutions if we will not be lazy parents. There are solutions to this, okay? It'll be a battle, but you got to do it. 87% of sexual solicitations are made to youth in chat apps. And when I say chat apps, I don't mean just the ones that have chat in the name like WeChat, Snapchat, things like that. I mean private messaging on major social networks, messaging on Instagram, messaging on Twitter. All of those, they didn't used to have it, but all of those services now have a private messaging features now. So again, that's why you need to be watchful. Let me ask you this. Should you have physical, actual access to your child's phone? Yes or no? How many of you say yes? Okay. Do you do that? If your child has their own device, they need to understand, and psychologically this does something as well, because there's been a lot of studies that show that kids that know that they're being watched are less likely to seek out things that their friends want them to do. Oh, you need to check this out. No, I can't check that out. I've heard kids at summer camps and on mission trips, I've heard them say it. No, I can't do that because my dad checks my phone. It works. So again, please make that irregular intervals. Ask the hard question. Why do you have 3 calculator apps, right? You don't even like math. You know what? That's weird. So again, ask those hard questions. 67%, and this is interesting, admit to clearing a browser history, search history, YouTube watch history, just fill in the blank there, in order to hide internet usage from you. There's a feature we're going to talk about. I don't know if we'll get to it tonight or not, but on the YouTube app, there's a feature, and I don't know if I put feature in quotations, that you can not just clear your search history, not just clear your watch history, but you can pause it. Pause your search history, pause your watch history. So if they go and hit that button, they can look up whatever they want, unhit that button, and nobody's none the wiser. When you check it, you see a regular history, you see history over the last few months of them watching videos, and you don't know anything about it. The YouTube app, no password protected, no PIN code behind that. It's just something that they can use. And so again, you need to be aware of that. And again, I'm not saying that your kids are doing that, but just ask. Ask those hard questions. This one's interesting. Social media use combined with depressive symptoms levels in teens 14 to 22 is up 18% just since March of 2020. Does anybody work in the counseling, psychology field in here? Okay. Can you...
I'm a divorce lawyer. I have to work with them a lot.
Does that sound correct to you?
Yes.
Because from what I understand, the normal increase is around, or was around 3 to 4% every year. And since March 2020, since COVID happened, since some of these kids, I talked with a group of kids in Raleigh, North Carolina, that North Carolina had much stricter COVID stuff than Tennessee did. They had not went back to school in January of 2021 yet. And it was one of those things where the depression symptoms were very much on the rise. And so this is just an average. I think that's telling. But when we think about it, and I told you this, the worst idea in the history of humanity is to have a middle schooler on social media. They don't need to be on social media. And in case I didn't say that loud enough, your middle schooler, if I had a microphone, I'd put it really close to my mouth like Bill Cosby used to do. But your middle schooler does not need to be on any form of social media. 8th grade, you can start to introduce and talk about that. You can even talk about it earlier, but just don't let them have access to that, especially unfiltered or unmanaged access. And again, every study that I've seen in the last 3, 4, 5 years has pointed to middle schoolers being that crucial time to where we need to make sure that they're not doing any of that. Not going to get into this. This is one of those that I could talk 45 minutes on, but we don't have time for that. We need to realize that privacy is an illusion. I think we the generation of parents, especially that grew up without this technology, that were introduced to it, I think we understand that. But I'll tell you that this is one of those things that the newer parents, or especially our kids who are teenagers now and maybe younger than that, they don't understand. Tell me what these tech companies care about. What do they care about? First and foremost. Your attention. Before that. Who said bottom line? They don't even care about your attention as much as they care about that bottom line, right? They care about those shareholders a whole lot more than they care about your family or kids, and they don't. Facebook does not care about your family or kids. They're the biggest social network on the planet. They've got half the people on the planet on that website. They don't care. So you are going to be the one that has to do the work to protect your children on that. Privacy is nothing but an illusion, okay? Hebrews 4:13, again, I like to put in Bible verses wherever I can. This one's interesting because it says, no creature is hidden from His sight, being God, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of Him whom we must give an account. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before His eyes, and He is the one to whom we are accountable. Very interesting to think about that. When I talk to kids about this kind of stuff, one of the things I like to bring up is that you may be smart enough to hide what you do on these devices from basically everybody. You might have a VPN, and you might have some weird security thing on your phone. You might have something that deletes messages after 30 seconds, and you might be really, really cautious and be able to hide all that stuff from your ball team or your parents, or maybe you hide all this other stuff. You can't hide it from the government, but you can try. But guess who you really can't hide it from? The Lord God. And so we are going to be held accountable. I tell kids this all the time. We are going to be held accountable not just for the things that we say to one another and the statements that we make, but the things that we type on these tiny little keyboards with our thumbs. And so again, we are held to that same standard just as parents are as well. Let's wrap this up. I talk about a bucket of feathers illustration sometime to kids as well. If you put a bucket of feathers, if I was to take this bucket of feathers on the screen outside right now, what would happen? Those feathers are going to go everywhere. The feathers don't weigh anything, right? Even on a modestly windy day, nothing like this. It's like a tornado outside for a day and a half. But if I took that out there, there's no way in the world that I'm going to get all of those feathers back in that bucket. My friend Eric Gray in Mobile, Alabama, he kind of said, once you put something out there, it is out there. It is like writing it in stone, and it is just as loud as you saying it on the town square at the top of your lungs. We need to make our kids understand. We understand that, but we need to make our kids understand that. It's an interesting concept. So, I gave you all this doom and gloom. Now what can you do? I want to give you some practicality before we move to our next session. And because I even work adjacent to preachers, I have to do an acronym for it. So, SPEED is the acronym that came about with this. The first thing that you can do is start. A lot of you have started and you've got a system and you are managing these things. You have parental controls enabled. You've got PIN codes on stuff. You're doing a good job. Sometimes your system fails you. Sometimes it doesn't. It happens to all of us. But if you have not started, if you've got little kids, if you've got small kids and you have never done this kind of stuff, here's something that you could do. I do this every 6 months. In fact, I just got through doing it just a few days ago. You take a big legal pad and just put a line down the center of it, and you make a list of devices in your home that connect to the internet, every single one of them. I almost guarantee you, making this list, you will find something that you forgot about, because that's how this happens. And then when you make that list of everything that connects to the internet, which, by the way, there's like microwaves and fridges that connect to the internet now. I sound so old saying that. Why is that? Why is that a thing? I don't know. There's little Android tablets embedded into fridges now, like the Samsung fridges. There was a kid that I read about one time that was grounded, and he managed to sign into some website and talk to his friends on the refrigerator. Okay? So again, if it connects to the internet, you need to put it on the list. And then on that right side of that pad, just write down what parental controls you have set. You might be surprised because I found a DVD player that we had, an old DVD player that we had connected that could access things like Netflix. And I was like, what? I didn't know this could do that. This thing had a layer of dust on it so thick that I could write my name in it. And we hadn't used it in years, but it was one of those things that was smart and it could access Netflix, YouTube, and other video services. And so that had to be secured. So again, make sure that you enable parental controls on those. We're going to talk a little bit more about family sharing and screen time as far as that goes in the next session. But just make sure that those are enabled on your devices. And we'll talk more about the technical stuff here in just a few minutes. I've mentioned this already, but plan. Develop a long-term plan. I told you my 12-year-old is on the autism spectrum, and every September and every April we sit down with his teachers and we do something called an individualized education plan. And what we should be doing for every child is to have some type of digital parenting plan, right? And have it written down, have it in a drawer in a filing cabinet. Make sure that you and your spouse work together on this. It looks different for every child. Nobody told me, by the way, that my children were going to be different. Did they tell you that? Because my 3 boys are completely different people. I thought they're going to just be little carbon copies of one another and they're just going to be nice little soldiers and they're going to do whatever I tell them to do. That is not the case at all. And they're completely different personalities and people, and we're going to have to deal with them differently. I can't deal with my middle child like I deal with my oldest, and vice versa. So again, a couple of different questions that you can do that. And of course, you've heard the phrase, failure to plan is a plan to fail. If you don't save for retirement, guess what? You're not going to have any money when you get old. That's how it is. And if we don't plan for our children's digital parenting and their well-being, we should not be surprised when they're 21 and in college and get in serious trouble over something they did on their phone. We shouldn't be surprised. The next one is enforce. This is most of the time not pleasant. And this is the thing where it all falls apart because we get lazy, we get complacent, we don't watch as much as we should. So let this be an encouragement to you to enforce the rules that you have made in your home and stick to them, okay? Don't let your kids go to bed with phones. Offer alternatives to that. Supervise directly when you can. Random intervals, you should be taking your child's device. All of these different things. Check and make sure that there aren't any devices that you don't know about. I learned that there is a whole gray or black market at some of our schools where kids will sell broken or old iPod touches and phones for 20, 30, 40 bucks. And they work fine over Wi-Fi. And that kid, there were several kids at, I'll tell you where it was, Lexington High School over in Lexington, Tennessee, where my brother-in-law's from. And they had found a ring of kids who had gotten all sorts of different used or broken phones and were just using them. And had separate accounts and they had set up separate different things. And so if your kid, if you ask them for your phone, if you say, let me see your phone, and they're not like this, if they just go, yeah, here you go. Like, okay. Do you have another device I don't know about? Do you have anything I know you may not have anything to hide. I'm not telling you that your kids are bad, right? I am telling you that your kids are kids. And they're going to do stuff like that. They're going to try to start, isn't that enraging to me? They want to start trying to have adulthood before it actually comes on them. You know? My 9-year-old asked me, Daddy, when can I get a job? And I said, honey, you've got the rest of your life to get a job. Don't worry about it right now. But I want money. Yeah, I do too, son, but that's not going to, it's just not how it works. So again, things to think about. Next E is encourage. This is a big one because we can always come down pretty hard on our kids. Get off that screen and don't do that, and you're on your screen too much, and you're not paying attention to me, and and all this other stuff. Well, guess what? We need to encourage them to use their device in positive ways as well, and encourage them to not use their device. Hey, you're going to soccer practice, you're not going to be on your phone. Just leave it in your car. You know, it's one thing I think it's really interesting is that when I talk to parents at our local private school and even parents in our public schools, they're the ones that want their kids to have the phones because they want to be in contact with them constantly. But we remember what it was like to grow up without this stuff. Who had a beeper? I had a beeper, right? I wasn't a lawyer or a doctor, but I had a beeper. And because it was cool for like 9 weeks in 1998, right? And it was one of those things where, you know what? My parents really didn't know where I was, but I mean, they knew where I was, but it wasn't something they needed to be in constant contact with me. So that's something to think about. Have them turn off notifications. That's something that us as parents can do as well. Turn off notifications. Encourage them to leave their device behind. Encourage them that they don't have to be on it constantly. The conversation that I had, the hour-long conversation that I had with about 40 teenagers ranging from 13 to 18 in Raleigh, North Carolina, I still think about that conversation. One of the number one things they said was, one, they want their parents to listen to them. So that's a lesson that we can learn. But the really other thing they said is, I feel this constant pressure from everybody around me to be on it all the time. And if my parents give me an excuse, I can throw them under the bus and say, well, my parents said I couldn't be on my phone this much. So give them reasons to not be on their devices constantly. Kind of an interesting idea. All right, last thing. Demand holiness and obedience. It's very simple. We go to church and we hear it every Sunday, right? We hear it from the pulpit, we read it in Scripture, but we are created, we have been created to be a holy and just and set-apart nation as Christians, and we should be demanding that from our children and our entire family. Okay? Questions? Comments? Complaints? Let's take a very quick break. It is 6:55. Let's come back at 7 o'clock. Again, if you need to use restrooms, they're right down here. I'm sure y'all know that. But again, if you've got any questions for me in the middle of the session, thank you very much. If we do have sensitive nature things, I will be recording all of this, but don't be afraid of the camera, because if we start a sensitive discussion and you have something that you have said that you do not want it to be public, I can delete that, I can edit that, okay? Thank y'all very much again. Let's reconvene here in about 4 minutes. Thank y'all so much.